We're in good shape.
Hey guys, this is Drax back with another how-to guide, and this time we'll be looking at the legend that is Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker, the son of Anakin and brother to Leia Organa. From humble beginnings as a moisture farmer, Luke, with the help of Ben Kenobi and Master Yoda, grew up to become a Master Jedi, who was able to turn his father Darth Vader back to the light and end the rule of Emperor Palpatine. In doing so, Luke became a legend in Star Wars canon and a fan favourite of many. Now in Star Wars Battlefront 2, Luke's abilities are Push, Repulse and Rush, and here he wields his custom green lightsaber. So getting straight into the abilities, starting with Push, here Luke uses the Force to push enemies in front of him, damaging them and knocking them over. His push ability is quite strong in the sense that it sends enemies flying. In this way, most of the time you'll be looking for ledges or drops where you can use this one to its maximum potential. In Heroes vs Villains, or HVV as I call it, the best way to eliminate enemies is normally by pushing them off platforms and letting them drop to their deaths. In this way, Push is Luke's main standout ability without star cards, but it isn't quite as good in Galactic Assault. The reason being it often pushes enemies a bit too far away from you to get the second hit needed to eliminate them. So the best tip I can give you with this one is try and use the Push in Galactic Assault when enemies have a wall or something else behind them. Then you'll get the damage from the Push and you'll be able to follow up with a rush attack. Push does work pretty well if you are being chased. A simple turn followed by the Push will get enemies off your tail for a bit so you can get away. It's also pretty good for clearing large groups in front of you. A good hit of this ability to anyone in the area will send them flying back. At this stage, if you are attacking normally, friendlies will help you finish them off. The next ability is Repulse, and here Luke sends a burst of energy out from the ground, dealing damage to any enemies nearby. This one will also knock them over and leave them open to a second attack. It's great for clearing rooms and any situation where enemies are cramping you in. Be aware though, you do need to get this one in quick, as Luke does a standstill animation hitting the ground with the force at the use of this ability. To use offensively on groups, I often will charge, maybe rush or jump into a group and hit them with a Repulse to weaken or kill them, finishing any off with a few saber swings. The only thing to be aware of when using this one is reinforcement units. I've noticed that sometimes these won't get knocked down, only taking the damage, so as standard against those units it's not the best attack. Any targets that don't get knocked over will of course be shooting at you throughout the animation, so this isn't my go-to ability when dealing with those guys. You can however make it a lot stronger with star cards, so we'll check that out shortly. But now we'll move on to the final ability, and this is Rush. Here Luke charges forward in a spin motion using the Force to attack or quickly move in any direction. Useful for closing gaps and finishing opponents off. Usually with his other abilities Push and Repulse, Luke sends enemies flying back, so you need to use this one to rush at them and finish the job. Unlike Ray's charge, which I think is far more useful, Luke's rush will only go a set distance, so it's best to attack enemies at that distance. Push them too far away and this won't reach. Attack from too close and you won't be able to follow up with more strikes. I would argue that the old saber rush ability that Luke had on the last game was in many ways superior to this one. Luke used to hold out his lightsaber and rush forward with speed, destroying anyone the saber hit. It's still useful in its current state, but just not as good as it was before on Battlefront 1, so personally I would like to see it changed around a bit. So that's the abilities right there, and you probably will have noticed that Luke seems to have got the short end of the stick in a lot of ways, so I can understand why you might be struggling with him. None of his base abilities really shine for aggression, unless you are using the Push in HVV of course. So what would I say is the right way to use Luke? Well, mostly it's going to be defensively, using your saber to block and deflect, looking for that window to hit them with the combo of all three abilities. If you can push a whole group against the wall, follow up with a rush to close the gap, possibly taking a few out with the attack, then any left can be obliterated with the Repulse ability. It's very situational, and most of the time you won't get to combine the three, so you'll be relying on Luke's speed to get around picking off singular targets. Where stamina is concerned, Luke can swing his lightsaber 8 times before he runs out. This won't stop him from swinging more, and it doesn't affect damage output. What it does do is stop Luke's ability to block and deflect. Now blocking and deflecting is key to surviving with any lightsaber user that doesn't benefit from crazy spin attacks. So just keep an eye on the circle that builds around the pointer in the middle of your screen. It starts out white and turns red as you use more stamina. When exhausted, switch to dodging or simply retreat from combat until you have gained it back. Often the best tactic with Luke is to block and advance on targets, deflecting shots back at them with a pointer on your screen. When close enough, you can then get some lightsaber attacks in. Each hit with the lightsaber will deal good damage, with it taking a maximum of 3 hits to kill an infantry unit, that being a heavy, and the rest will take 1 to 2 hits. So that's his abilities and his weapon right there. Next up is his star cards, and here I'll show you how to get a bit more out of Luke's abilities by combining a few together and adding one that ups his survivability. So the first one for me has to be Cleansing the Darkness. This will give Luke 20 health back every time he defeats an enemy soldier, and up to 100 back when he defeats a villain. It's a key card for keeping Luke alive. Whenever you take too much damage, maybe on the front lines, you can then change up tactics, skirting around the outsides, picking off singular targets to get that health back. Any villain comes along and you are likely to take some damage, but at least with this one equipped you can get up to 100 health back for defeating them. This is my favourite type of star card, allowing you to keep your hero going for longer, and in a way take more risks. I have to say that if Luke didn't have this card, I probably wouldn't use him as much. This is how much of a difference this one makes to him. The next 2 cards I struggled with choosing, as Luke doesn't really have any other great cards. Some heroes and villains have cards that affect him a lot, making them a fair deal stronger, but in Luke's case not so much, so I ended up with 2 cards that make one ability more powerful. So here I have Strong Riposte, and at top tier this will give the Riposte ability a 30% increased area of effect. With a larger area I can make sure that when I use this one, all enemies in the area will be damaged and knocked away. I then combine this with Epicenter to further buff the Riposte ability, giving it a bonus damage of 40 at top tier to aid with destroying groups of enemies. Now because I made the Riposte area larger with Strong Riposte and then combined it with Epicenter, the inner extra damage area is also larger. This means more targets get caught in that inner area and are either eliminated or easier to kill shortly after. I was running with Extended Push Reach, but without any bonus damage cards for this ability, I felt like the 2 for Riposte were the better options in Galactic Assault. You may want to switch to the push options in HVV, as that is of course where the ability really shines. Now I honestly wish he had a few better cards, but at least with the cards I have recommended, he will have one very strong ability and good survivability. I did play around with some of his other cards for a bit, but found they had either a negative effect or were just too weak to be noticeable. You may have found something different that works for you, and that is great, but as this is a guide, these are just my recommendations. So now let's move on to the final tips. And the first is that Luke, like other Force users, has great movement speed and a good jump. Use these 2 to both attack and evade, making use of rooftops and high spots to get the advantage or to get away. On top of his normal jump, Luke can also propel himself further by using his push mid-air. This nearly doubles his basic jump ability, allowing him to reach higher up places. Once again, this could come in handy when chasing down a target, maybe that pesky Boba Fett, or maybe just whilst getting away from others who can't quite jump as high. The next tip is pretty simple, and it's to keep blocking. In both HVV and Galactic Assault, this is important to minimise damage taken. It also allows you to assess the situation and opens up windows to attack. When being shot at by enemies, Luke can deflect a blaster shot straight back at them. In this way you'll find you get a lot of kills by simply deflecting. In HVV it's a bit different, as you'll mostly be facing lightsaber using villains and you'll need to block before one comes in swinging. When he hits, this will stun the villain for a brief second, and then you can get a free hit in. Repeatedly using this tactic will normally give you the win. Blocking will also stop any abilities from being used on you. In general, spamming attacks is not recommended, as it can waste time and lead to unwanted damage being taken. You'll be a lot better off if you learn to use the attack button for only the number of attacks that you need to finish your target. It's not always a bad thing, but it can be a bit inefficient, and good players will normally beat spammers. And finally, I have used the dodge. Luke's dodge is essential for avoiding damage from explosive stun attacks. This is done by using the default roll button and will also prove useful when you're out of stamina and can't block. Not only for defense though, Luke can also use this one to close gaps alongside his speed and rush ability, making it easy for him to catch up with targets. So in conclusion, yes, I would like to see a few changes to Luke in the future. Maybe a simple thing would just be to give him some better star cards. He definitely isn't the strongest hero available, but if you can use his speed and defensive abilities wisely, using those main abilities in a combination for devastating damage, then I'm sure you can dominate the Battlefront with Luke Skywalker. I hope this guide has been helpful for all watching. Any questions or thoughts, feel free to leave them below. I just want to say a big welcome and thank you to anyone who has recently joined the channel. We are now at over 7,000 subscribers here on Drax Gaming, so I'm glad you guys are appreciating the content. I'll be back with more soon, but for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.